one of the main things that I worried about when we were building Crosspoint was the industry's so inconsistent, right? There's so much variety in devices and manufacturers and APIs and the way that devices send data and the type of data devices send. That was actually a huge point of concern. You can't say, I expect you to have up to but not exceeding 16 levels of audio coming in on my data stream or whatever, right? You can't do that. And you might not even have the same format for the data that's coming in. You might be indexing, meters differently. You might have them formatted differently. Maxes and mins might be different. Like, you don't get to be that opinionated. And I'm excited because what I thought was going to be a huge opportunity is indeed exactly it's what I was worried about it being, right? We have
Jim's
to be
here.
flexible about taking it in. What's up, Jimmy?
How you doing, buddy? Good to see you.
Right.
Well, have a seat. You're gonna jump right in. And get
All
on
right.
camera.
Should we jump right back into that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the thing I was
Then we can go back and kind of talk about the class.
Yeah. So we were talking about the Crosspoint release,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the main motivations behind the design of Crosspoint is that it should be able to take any kind of data from anywhere, right? It's generic in that you can format the data however you want and then send it to the system. We can take that data, and the only thing that matters is that you tell us what the format will look like in advance. So we can, and that doesn't matter. It's by customer, by environment. We can say, hey, this particular type of data, say from a processor X, right, is going to look like this. Cool. Now we're ready to receive that data forever, as long as it's in that format. And the reason we do that is data validation, right? We have to ensure that good data is coming in. We'll drop the data if it doesn't match the schema. But now you need data that looks a little different to come in. Cool. That's another twin definition or another version to the existing one if we don't need that old schema anymore. And so it allows us to be unlimited, like to have unlimited flexibility in how we take in data and then how we extract data from that. In the class, which we need to get into, in the class, we talked about the concept of ETL, right? So extract, transform, load. This is old database talk, right? And it's interesting because it doesn't generally apply to like IoT devices and stuff like that, because we don't need to do ETL on those types of systems, right? They send the data to the platform they're supposed to send it to automatically, like refrigerators, right? Or whatever other IoT device you may have. In AV, it's totally different because we have to go get the data. We have to extract the data from those devices, and we have all these wild APIs, right? There's no standardization across any of this. Sometimes you're doing web scraping, right, off of these endpoints to get data. And so the idea of an ETL is that we would extract data from a legacy system, whatever format it's in, transform it into something normalized and useful, and then load it into a target system or a target database. And so that's the traditional approach when you want to get data from some system and load it in. So that's what we taught in the class. What's interesting is there's a new version of this, a new paradigm called ELT, where we extract the data and we load it raw. We load the raw data straight in prior to any transformation, as long as it's in a serialized form, JSON, right? Something like that. Load that data in, and then we can do the transformation in the platform. We actually leave the raw data alone. We just transform how you visualize it and look at it in the tool itself, which gives us just tons of flexibility, right? We don't have to rely on you picking a very specific data format to send in, right? We just say, take the data as it is, and we'll make it look the way you need it to look in the platform afterwards, according to your tenant, your needs. So
if you change your mind on how you want to visualize it, the raw data is always there. It hasn't been
and it's always the same.
touched. Yeah.
And we don't have this strong opinion about, well, it has to be this many columns and it has to have these fields that are worded this way. No, not at all. Yeah, it's exciting.
Well, and that's the fundamental difference on Crosspoint, right? As a data aggregation platform, it's not a monitoring tool. I was just explaining this to one of our higher education clients, right? What tools are you using? How useful would it be to have that in a single place? As I was describing Crosspoint as a data aggregation utility, it's more focused on being able to take data from multiple different sources and present it in a very useful way.
Yeah.
And so as I described it as not a monitoring platform, use your own monitoring platform. Use XIO Cloud, use Lens, use whatever you want to use, whatever's getting the data As long as it has an API, we can take that data and present it in a more useful, importantly, single pane of glass type approach.
Yeah.
And it just immediately was like, ooh, I could use one tool.
Yeah. Because you're always going to, if you're an AV and you're here for the next 10 years, okay, you're going to be using multiple tools. You're going to have multiple tools. There's always going to be configuration management utilities for AV devices.
For sure.
Until some kind of universal standards are adopted or whatever it might be. And we're not super good at that. So, I mean, gosh, look at AVB, like it's a mess.
No evidence that that's near.
So I would say we need to plan on being able to extract data from lots of different systems and make it useful. Just like, I mean, that's what systems integrators do every day, right? We use components from lots of different manufacturers and we make them into something useful. What's all we're doing?
Data
we're doing
integration.
Systems integration, right? Exactly. It's data integration.
Data integration. Fun.
From multiple different sources. Yeah. It's interesting. I was talking to, who was it? I was talking to one of our students and they were talking about how far down the path they were of, I have all this data already. It's in my processors. They've got like 800 classrooms. I've got all this data in my processors and I'm ready to send it. I'm ready to send it to my platform, but the platform I'm using only wants to take metric data, not inventory data. They can't define the fields that they want to send. They have to morph their data into the destination fields as they expected. So lots of frustration. This in particular student's like, can I just push this to a database, to my own database, and then use like some Grafana or some visualization tool on top of it to look at my data? And I was like, well, I mean, you could, but this is exactly what Crosspoint was built to do.
Yep.
Send it to us as is, right? Come as you are. Or as we like to say, meet the industry where it is.
Yeah.
Yep. Meet the data where it is.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so what does it look like to take that data aggregation and do that translation into something usable for the client? Is that a custom single pane of glass for each client, depending on what they want? Given all the data that they have, we just kind of...
Yeah, basically, like each tenant needs their data to be a bit different, right? And that's AV, right? Everything's a bit of a snowflake. So when part of the process of getting a tenant set up and ready is where is the data coming from? And what's it look like for you, right? And we define those as what we call twin definitions, right? Digital twin definitions. And that is, here's the way we expect the data to come in. Here are the properties that we expect that we extract from that data, and a few other points. And so when we have that tenant come in, get them set up, they start sending that data in, it all basically transforms to look the same in the portal. It's just there's more key value pairs, right? There's more fields available.
Yeah, maybe you need more columns of data for your application versus...
Like you want to track serial number and serial number 2, right? Well, they only want to track serial number. Cool. Well, that's fine. You just send in data we'll extract it for serial number 2, and it's going to show up on your system or on your devices as serial number 2. So instead of here's the columns with each of the data points, we instead do a table that is, here's the key, here's the value, here's the description of what that data is and the last time it was updated. Now that table can be as long as you want it to be for a system or a device. We don't care. What's more is we don't just get that data from one source. We can take data from many sources to tell us, to give us perspective on the exact same device or the exact same system. So I have this metaphor that I like to use for this. It's a visual, okay? So picture yourself you're standing out, you're on vacation, and you're looking at Stonehenge, okay? Pick a spot, look at Stonehenge, you pull out your phone, you take a picture, right? And you see X number of stones, you see some grass, you see some tourists, right? You got a beautiful picture of Stonehenge, fantastic. What happens if you take 10 steps to the right? If you pull out your phone and you take another picture of Stonehenge, do you have the same picture? Exact same picture?
It's not exactly the same.
It's not exactly the same. It's still of Stonehenge, right?
Yep.
But maybe a different number of stones
Extra
based
column.
on where you've turned. Maybe some light between the stones where they weren't there before. Maybe tourist isn't quite there where it was. The sun in the backdrop is a little bit different. We don't see the world as human beings in 2D. We see, with 3 dimensions, we can detect space, right? We can feel that. Well, our systems are not 2D either. They're 3-dimensional. It's a room, right? Or it's a device it has dimension and shape, and the data has dimension and shape too. So if you talk to the device directly and say, okay, well, tell me this, 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 and this about yourself, right? Okay, that's one perspective. Let's also ask the cloud platform that's managing that device for some of that data and any other data we can get. Cool, now we've got two perspectives. Now let's ping it. That's a third perspective. Now let's ask the UCC platform. There's a fourth perspective, okay? So we start to be able to create this 3D representation, right, of this particular device or system. And, you know, if each one of those things is a digital twin, then we call this 3D picture a composite digital twin, okay? We've got all the digital twin components, and then we've got this composite that tells us so much more about the whole system itself. So that was always the idea, right? We're going to have data from different sources. We can't just say it's all going to come from one place and that that's the truth. We have to be able to ask a little deeper than that.
Well, that's the immediate kind of failing of when you look at a monitoring platform and you talk to customers about that. Almost immediately it goes to, well, but like when was it last serviced, and like what's the warranty period on it, right? Like who last touched it? Was there a service case attached to it? It immediately starts to sprawl outside of just, you know, a monitoring tool, because you can ping monitor the device, but it doesn't tell you all this other stuff that's really important
That's it. Like
to the users and the managers.
I know the endpoint's working, but what about the display? What about the
Yeah.
mics?
Or the service, or
So much more to it.
Mhm.
Or when was the last time it was visited, like you
yeah.
said,
These
and
are-
where were
this
the
is-
pictures from that visit,
Right.
and when was the last project, and yeah, exactly.
I mean, down to on a call the other day, like who's the in-country service technician for that vendor that we like, that we want to make sure always ends up servicing this region. Like it's an endless amount of information and data that you might want to know or attach to a space, right, or a system as an AV manager.
Oh yeah,
Taking care of that. Like,
I literally built what you just talked about in a spreadsheet for a large customer
Yeah.
that has video walls deployed all over the world, and the spreadsheet is a database of everything about that video wall, including the local servicing partner
Right,
for it.
right.
So it's just ironic
Right.
that you brought that up.
right.
Yeah, that needs to be in a tool somewhere, not in a spreadsheet.
Yeah. It's too hard to find, right? And this is what we
Yes.
see is without the tool, you have, you know, technology managers just aggregating static data all over the place. They're pulling the data from these different sources. They're already kind of doing it, but it just goes into a spreadsheet and it's immediately outdated.
50 spreadsheets,
Right,
and no
yeah.
one can access it.
Right.
Yeah. It's funny, we actually consider a spreadsheet as a potential data source,
Yeah.
right? So we can take spreadsheet data in, and you know, based on when it was the last updated, right? We can look at the spreadsheet data and go, okay, well, let's see if those devices or systems that are in the spreadsheet, for example, if those exist in the tool right now. Okay, well, if they don't, and we'll check many things, right? We'll check pairing metadata that we use. We'll check the names. Do the names match, right? Or any other things like that. And if we don't find it, okay, well, then let's create that device or that system in the database. Well, let's mark it as pending acceptance, right? Because that's an automatically created device or system. We really want to make sure the technology manager or the engineer, whoever's working that tenant, can say, that is correct. Now, the next time somebody updates that spreadsheet and we scrape it, a new device is on there, right? Or a system's been removed, we're going to catch that and see, okay, a new device. Was it created? Can we pair the data? No? Great. If we don't see that device, then we're going to start to see the age of the last update on that device get longer and longer and longer. We say, hey, we haven't had an update on this device, on the data for this device in like 2 months, and all the other ones are updated today. So you start to sort that into a report. Oh, well, this device got deleted and nobody cleared it out of the database. Cool. So it's that constant scraping of external data and then comparing that data.
Yeah.
I mean,
And it's offline, and you ping it, and now
Yes.
it's gone, right?
Yes.
So it's, you know, old data on a spreadsheet. It's no
Yes.
longer on the network. Right.
and the data sources are different for every organization.
Yeah.
So that was one of the big motivations there, right? You may have an IP management system,
Right.
right? Okay, does the AP management system have an API? Can it send webhooks? Can it, anything like that? Perfect. Then we can start to take in MAC address information, right? Or maybe things like that, and go get that from the IP address system. Is it in the IP address system? Well, that's going to boost our confidence that that's a real system, right? the one that came up it was very interesting the other day was if you've ever adminned an Active Directory environment or worked in an organization that's adminned an Active Directory environment or any calendar directory service, and you want to manage room accounts, those things get out of date fast, and you end up with rooms in your AD instance that don't exist anymore, right? Who's maintaining that? Nobody, because the AD admins have no idea whether that room is gone. You just tore the room down, facilities or whoever it was, right? You tore the room down, didn't tell anybody. That calendar account's going to exist forever until somebody fixes it, right?
And the license fee that goes along with
Yes,
it. Yeah.
exactly. So how do you audit that, right? Well, if you have a digital twin set up for Active Directory and we're scanning AD or having them push us through like a Microsoft Flow or whatever it might be, having them push us AD information, then we can audit that. We can say, well, this AD account doesn't match the name of any of the systems, or the email address of this AD account isn't found in any of our systems. Let's flag that, right? That's maybe not a real system. That's data we'd want to dig into. So those types of things that make technology managers' lives easier, make them look better, right? They help them see their environment and truly know it. I would have done anything to have something like that when I was responsible for 3,000, meeting spaces. It was a nightmare.
Well, why don't we talk about the class?
That's a good idea.
Yeah. How did it go?
Wow. How did it go? It was crazy.
Intense,
Yeah,
right?
intense. Like, I think part of it is that it was our content, right? And
That was a huge part of it.
And I'm going to be real, right? We had a plan going into day one of the course that changed quite a bit the day before. So we had a pretty good plan, we thought. We had a lot of content built. And then we got together and we really deeply reviewed it. We're sitting there in the room and we're going, we need to change that. That's not going to be the best experience for the students tomorrow, right? We can do that better. And so Fred didn't get a lot of sleep these first few days because every day we take the feedback from the course and go adjust and change slides and reorder things and build new content and whatever we could to just try and get the content to stick, because it's complicated and difficult. And I think it showed. The students seemed overwhelmingly positive about the course. I would say most of the feedback we got was that, my expectations coming into this class is that I was going to leave being able to go monitor all my AV systems. Those expectations were not met, but those expectations weren't necessarily correct. Right? We had no idea how hard it was. And that was the key takeaway, right? I think that most students got. Monitoring AV is really hard. It's really hard to do right now in this industry. And in monitoring, it's just this tiny sliver of their jobs as technology managers, right? Of the whole management stack and all of the things that go along with it. So it was interesting to get that feedback of, some of them got a lot more because they were very technical and they were like, yeah, I can do some of this stuff on my own and I don't have as many, barriers within my organization. But a lot of the students came out of that with a bit of real talk, right? Like, this is really, really difficult and you need to be prepared to spend like a year plus and get a team and go through this process together. It's going to be a lot. So that was good.
That was a lot of the feedback, though, was a lot of folks felt like they had a language to take back and actually be able to have the conversation, right? Understanding maybe a bit more of what the conversation actually is at a larger scale, and more importantly, a common language to take back and be able to paint the picture, which wasn't necessarily what they thought they were going to get out of the class.
What was the mix like? Like, was it largely technology managers? Was it engineers? Like, what were...
It was part technology managers, part integrators, part consultants, a couple of consultants in there, and a couple of manufacturers in there.
Yeah.
Which actually, well, so okay, so you immediately hit on the thing that took us teaching the first day to realize, which was we tried to build a class that accommodated everyone, and very quickly some of the feedback that came back from the students was like, you need to have a class for tech managers, you need to have a class for highly technical software development programmer people that are going to go into the weeds of actually doing the thing, versus, because our class is really split between here's all the crazy technical tools that you need to know and the skill sets that you need to have in order to be able to go even attempt to do this on your own. But let's also look at this from a business objective perspective, because we like to say just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? You can, and we showed that you can, but that doesn't matter if it doesn't actually meet a business goal or an objective. And so we spent half the class talking about stakeholder analysis, talking about how to pull what motivates out of each of these people, how to actually build a KPI, how to build a successful outcome, and then more importantly, how to put parameters around how you're going to measure that and be able to put a number to it from a success perspective. So there was like a good mix of people that were there for that conversation, and there was a good mix of people that were there for digging through and actually writing some drivers to get information out of. But even the tech managers that were there for the stakeholder conversation were all super grateful to have the data and to dig in, because it gave them a better understanding of what it actually takes to do this stuff. So, and we only went,
Yeah.
That's what I was going to challenge about the multiple classes is when else are you going to get, like to do it successfully, right? You would need that cross-functional team to get together to talk about all those different perspectives to make like a really good, complete and effective solution. So it was actually kind of cool that you had all of those different personas in the one class.
I think that was the ultimate outcome, but it was challenged along the way.
Yeah.
Because there were times where we did exercises that were like, okay, you're going to define this KPI from Frank's perspective. Frank was our pseudo technology manager that we played when they needed to interview us. And very quickly it was like, okay, so am I an end user, or am I an employee within Frank's organization, or am I an integrator talking to Frank, right? So what approach, what frame are you looking at this from? And that was really good feedback. With that multiple levels of feedback of like, it would have just been easier. And we quickly realized like, oh, this seems like a no-brainer. You're always going to look at this from the customer's perspective, because every other person in the room is here to serve the customer. So yeah, it's an end user conversation, not an integrator conversation.
Yeah, it was fascinating. And the class, the students were just amazing.
Super engaged,
challenging. It was interesting. We had a lot of people in that room, and you could tell that all of them were having some degree of like pain over this, right? Everybody, gosh, the data,
What was the
survey
survey data?
unbelievable. Jeremy spent more time looking at it than I did.
Oh yeah.
But every time we survey any group of students for a monitoring talk, I always ask a few of the same questions. And one of them is, how many of your devices are you monitoring? And we'll say in fifths, right? And vast majority, a fifth or less, right? 20% or less of their devices are under any kind of monitoring. Any? How many monitoring tools are you using? 0, 1, 2 to 5 or more? And 2 to 5 is usually the bulk, but we have a lot that are 0 and we have a lot that are 1. But don't mistake 1 being a single pane of glass. Right. It's not. It just means we only have the 1.
The little piece.
Right? Yep. How satisfied are you? Are you done? That's the way I phrase it. Are you done? Is your monitoring practice complete? Right? What would you rate your completeness? And 1 star, 2 stars, right? Low, low, low. And how urgent is it for you? Oh, how satisfied are you? Always low stars, frowny faces, right? And how urgent is it for you to have monitoring? When were you expected to have monitoring ready? And it's always yesterday. Mm-hmm. Yesterday. Super high dissatisfaction, right? Low satisfaction. Super high urgency. Hundreds of thousands of devices not monitored. I'm going to say tens of millions of devices not monitored across the industry.
Oh,
across a small group of people, you're already in the hundreds of thousands of devices.
For sure.
Yeah.
Thousands
in one class.
Tens of thousands. Of thousands.
Yeah.
For sure.
Unbelievable. I mean, that's the security nightmare there alone, much less just the lack of data. And let's be real, IoT industry, like appliances figured this out a long time ago, right? Like we started embedding IoT devices, IoT stacks into every one of these, electronics, right? Things that are all over the place because we want to know about them as manufacturers or as product makers, right? We want to know what's going on. We want to know, are they working? We want to know if they're being used. I mean, there's a fine line with privacy most certainly, but in a commercial product in particular, we need to know some things about our customers and our devices. Otherwise, we can't make them better, right? And whether you're tracking that as a manufacturer or not, all of those data silos and all of those unmonitored devices, there's just such a vacuum. How do we even know what versions of firmware are out there running right now? We don't.
The manufacturers don't either because we're a massive channel model, right?
Yes.
Like the manufacturers go through the channel to the end user for the most case, and we've learned through like TSIA research that when you've got that channel model, it makes it really tough for the manufacturers to know anything about where their devices are. Out there in the wild.
Yeah, this is the danger of a siloed, walled garden industry, right? We still are in this walled garden phase of AV. The whole industry is like this still, and the downside is, none of our stuff really talks to each other, and we don't have all of our data in one place. Data silos mean an incomplete picture of the system health, right? Of where devices are, of security, of asset lifecycle requirements, of warranty exposure. I mean, pick anything, right? Anything. And so if you don't have all that in one place, you're blind, right? You're blind as an integrator, as a manufacturer, in particular as an integrator and customer though. So how do we solve for that when we're still in the walled gardens phase of the industry, right? Nobody wants to take the first step and say, no, our cloud platform will work with any device. We'll take any data. Well, we just got tired of waiting, I think.
Yep.
We got tired of waiting.
Well, and there were several students in the room who were of like mind. They too had gotten tired of waiting, and a previous large financial organization that we have some common experience with. They too got sick of it and said, we're going to build our own.
Yeah.
There were several higher education people in the room that had built their own platform, and so they were incredibly excited to have this type of a content coming up that take the power back. You can do this if you have the resources, time, and energy. And what came out of it very clearly is that higher education is a absolute optimal target market for it. They actually have the time, money, resources to be able to go do some of this stuff. Some of them are pretty far down the path in some cases on their own stack, complete own stack.
Well, those youngins.
In that model,
you're right.
The youngins.
In that model, what's interesting is you've got manufacturers who are coming out with their own, cloud point tools for monitoring their own ecosystems.
Yep.
Still can't take in data from other sources, right? So you've got multiple manufacturers now, and from an end user perspective, they're saying, so I've got to pay a license fee now for that platform and that platform and that platform. And so now I've got 5 platforms. Great. I need to log into 5 different places to see anything. And I got to pay for all of it. Like, that's not value add anymore, right? I don't think it ever was, but value add is now, how does the hardware, what's the API on the device so that I can actually just pull the data, right? Or are you going to give me a free cloud platform and pull it from there? But paying per device or paying for separate portals will, in the future, I think, actually just drive people away from those solutions.
That's a huge part of the conversation, which for me is like the fundamental problem. Why is this not further along? Because there hasn't been commercial pressure coming back from the end users. But I think we're on a tipping point.
Yep.
I think we're on a tipping point because now IT is in control, and IT is the end user, and they have the same expectation that AV is going to act like IT, that I'm going to have the available information so that I can act. And then I'm going to have historical data so I can make future decisions. Like almost kind of a, why aren't you already there, guys? We've been doing this for 20 years.
Well, all it takes is for an organization to say, you will not put anything in a room, you will not put any technology here that doesn't meet these, observability and management requirements, and you're going to eliminate, certain vendors from the running. Like, sorry, you're out. No opportunity here.
Yeah, and you're in a commodity. I know this is maybe not an unpopular opinion, but it is my opinion that the manufacturing side, in particular, the hardware within the AV industry, is completely
100%.
commoditized.
Yeah.
Display is a display is a display, and the only battleground, in my opinion, left to fight on is manageability. That's the battleground that's left to fight on in most AV products, especially in conference rooms and classrooms. Okay, now I get it. In production, it's different, and that is a completely different market. Totally understand. But in the conference room and the classroom, which is a significant part of this industry, okay,
Most of it.
the only battleground left is how easy can you make it for me to manage? And so, what's been the natural reaction? Well, here's an extension of our ecosystem, right?
Yep.
Oh, here's my cloud platform. Now I've made it easier for you to manage. If you see a cloud platform, guarantee you, manufacturer already knows that that's the battleground they have left to fight on. What they don't realize yet, and they don't do a good job of yet, and I don't know that's for lack of trying, but there's an empathy problem. They only see the world through their product's eyes.
Yeah.
And that is not how literally any other segment of this channel sees the world. We see the world through the system's eyes and through the technology manager's eyes, right? The technology manager who actually has to deal with this thing on day one forward for years. So I'm very interested to see as more innovation starts to come from further down the channel, which has not been the case.
Yep.
Integrators and end users have not traditionally been the main drivers of innovation in the industry. It's been
Manufacturer.
handed down to us by the manufacturing community. So of course it fits their worldview. That's changing. That is the movement, I think, is the innovation starts coming from down the channel, right? End user organizations and integration companies who start becoming software development houses, who start building their own tools, which we saw over and over again. How ridiculous is that, right? That a university has to build its own software to deal with its AV devices when monitoring is a 100% commoditized market in the rest of IT.
Well,
100%.
You can guarantee they're not writing their own IT infrastructure monitoring platform.
Seriously, right? There's zero reason to, right? It's a healthy market.
Well, because you have manufacturers who've standardized.
Bingo.
Right.
That's the issue.
Well, and you've got pressure, so in the manufacturers who are building their cloud monitoring tools as the last battleground, right? How do they build more value? They build bigger ecosystems, right?
Yes.
And so then you get into
share.
proprietary.
It's all about market
How can
share,
I
yeah.
drive market share and get more and more devices? And you're going to run up against. Well, now we've got to be a display manufacturer, right? Or you're never going to get all the hardware endpoints, and you don't have the platforms, right? You're not going to be Zoom and Teams, right? So you can't stop this. Like they're never going to be the end all, single solution. There's always something else.
Always.
So yeah, I think the pressure from, nope, you got to specify it this way so that we can observe it and monitor it and manage it. And like you said, that can become the next value add from those vendors and stop building, proprietary cloud monitoring platforms and just make your stuff easier to
Just
monitor
adopt a standard.
and adopt
Just
a standard.
adopt a standard.
Yeah,
Right.
so we can work with it. I know we only have a few minutes left, but I wanted to dig into that right there, the standardization element and open source, because that has become a very interesting conversation coming out of the class. So we taught the class using an open source piece of software called Node-RED. Node-RED has been around for a really long time. It was built by IBM and contributed to open source. The OpenJS Foundation currently manages it. And it has millions of users. It's been used across multiple industries, and particularly in in the industrial IoT space, factory floors, things like that, computer vision, machine learning, all sorts of things like that. Node-RED is amazing for because it's low-code, flow-based programming. And the first time I put it up in front of the audience, they all kind of went, "Oh, yeah," and I see them all whisper, "Kind of looks like a DSP."
Yeah.
Right?
Have you seen it?
Flow-based
Yeah,
programming.
big fan of the show.
And one of the things that was very interesting coming out of that whole class was, I really want to learn more about Node-RED.
Yep.
This is interesting stuff because it is a free open source solution that is frankly more capable
Whew.
than any control system product on the market today. More
Okay.
capable and more mature
Mhm.
than any control system product on the market today.
And actually has more
More users.
people with expertise that can
Yes.
support that.
Yes.
I shared that with a higher education client this morning. I said, go Google Node-RED on
Yeah.
LinkedIn and find 18,000 people. And guess what? None of them are AV people.
Right.
Yeah, none of them. Exactly. So there's this whole, arena we haven't even looked into yet, right? Our world is small. We're the frog at the bottom of the well, right? And that's what's changing, I think, is that as we start to, as change makers and as rebels, start to change things and start to say, no, I'm not going to deal with this anymore. I'm done. I'm over it. Here's some stuff that really, really works. It's free. It's open source. Why don't we build a community around it, or join the existing community that's already there around it, and start to vote with our wallets, right? Like, stop buying this stuff. Stop buying this stuff because we think we have to, and start actually doing some of this, ourselves, using free open source software with massive community support. There's no such thing as an open source AV company yet.
I wish I would have had that tool set when I was programming, man. Oh, holy cow. It is the ultimate toolbox of get data from anything.
Yep. 4,400 plus community nodes created by community members. None of them are official nodes. They're all created by community members. What's stopping any of us from, grabbing an API from one of the, microphone manufacturers, for example, and wrapping that in a node in an afternoon and contributing it to the community so it's free to use? Free. What I'm interested in is how long until we start seeing Dante nodes, right? Or other AV protocols and the control for those protocols start to get wrapped into a node-based, flow-based programming like this. So I'm very excited about that potential of the open source community mindset. I think the universities in particular would be just so excited to experiment and play in that arena. And I can't wait to start pushing that envelope as soon as possible.
Well, to back that up with some data, so I just left the Avixa State of the Industry report, and leaning into IT tools, right, and our small industry, right, projected next year $300 billion for AV.
Wow.
IT is $5 trillion.
That does help,
right?
Maybe put it into perspective.
right. Last year we were at the TSIA conference, right? You see the trajectory of technology companies making these transitions, and when you look at from products to services and things, and we look at our industry, and it's like, oh yeah, we haven't actually started that transformation yet, and they finished it and started 10 years ago. So we're continuously behind, right? And then one more data point from that lunch today, expected product growth category, biggest 2x everything else, was software and control. And managed services.
It's scary news.
2x.
It's very scary news for the traditional AV industry,
Yeah.
right? Because it's all of this is totally possible. It can happen now. It's just hiring the right people who are comfortable in those disciplines. But that means a vast departure from how we've done things for the past 50 years, 40 years, whatever, and that's freaky.
But maybe not fast, right? It's like, oh, that tool kind of looks like a DSP, right? Like it's very familiar.
Technology-wise, 100%.
Right. Yeah.
But in terms of market share, proprietary
Yes.
solutions,
Yes.
and manufacturers making a lot of money because it was easy, right? That's where a lot of AV came from, is use our stuff because look how easy it is to program, look how easy it is to lay out, and now all of a sudden we're saying, well, we've got all this open source stuff which is just as easy and more powerful and more resources we could tap to get it done.
Yeah, and more non-AV systems driving the meeting room.
Which the people
right?
buying
the
the
biggest
AV
market
systems are more
sector was
excited about,
corporate.
because now it's
Yeah,
from their home team, from the IT.
yeah, and it's that we're not just programming a user interface anymore. It's like, oh, Zoom's actually got the UI, and what do we really want to do is a lot of times just on the back end, write workflows and automate and connect to IoT devices and web services and platforms and all these different things, where it just doesn't make sense to put a $1,000 box somewhere on the
No.
network that it's got proprietary everything. So yeah, it doesn't service, it doesn't serve the end user, right, or the manager really anymore.
It's inevitable.
Yeah.
It will happen. I mean, all the AV industry did was go hire some smart software developers and put a big easy button on it for non-software developers.
Yeah.
But now
they
AV
monetized.
is in IT and IT is software, right? IT has that capability. IT already thinks that way. To Fred's point, MSPs build their own software all the time. I don't have the tools I need to serve my customer. I go build my own software.
And I think that's what was driving all the different, and this is my unlearned opinion, but that's what was probably driving all those different panes of glass,
Yeah.
is that everyone wants a taste of that
World.
Yeah.
world.
Yeah.
And
Well-
so come to me, come subscribe to me. I know it's not perfect, but it's easy.
Well, trying to build recurring revenue, trying to
Yeah,
monetize
that's
it,
Yeah.
That's
right?
it.
That's
Everyone.
in the vendors, manufacturer community, right? Is how, where are we going to get new revenue stream from? We're selling hardware now, even more commodity hardware. So how are we going to make it more valuable? And it was cloud services.
Yep.
So it's BYOD. Bring your own data. From my perspective, the way I mentioned it to Fred was there was a pretty big dent made in the industry over the last couple of days. There's a really interesting conversation that was made in that class, or that was created in that class, and it's going to make some waves. So pretty excited to see where it goes.
Awesome.
A lot of potential follow-up content.
Exciting times.
It's good to see you guys.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good to
super
see
fun.
you all.
Cool.
Looking forward to the next one.
Yes. Have a great show.
You too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks, guys.
All right. See you later.